Michael Morales. Michael Morales is like a John Jones level talent. I'm gonna say it right now. I've been watching him for a minute. 25 years old, 18-0 against game opponents. When we look back when John Jones was coming up and he was undefeated, he was fighting guys like Stephan Bonner. He was fighting a lot of really good fighters coming up. Michael Morales has now beat, Neil Magny, Gilbert Burns, and many others on his way to the top. Most notably for me was when he beat Nikolai Veravinov in the Contender Series. Nikolai is a hell of a fighter. A lot of people don't know, but Nikolai, very good fighter. And that's when he got on my radar when I really started watching him and paying attention to him. And he's a really good fighter. He is the youngest guy. No one has really successfully been able to go in there at a young age, like 25, and be a number one contender and really still, especially at welterweight. He's a guy who right now could become a champion right now at 25. If he were to fight Jack Della Magdalena, I'm going to go with him because he has an X factor, the same X factor John Jones had when he was coming up. Now, when you look at John Jones when he was coming up in the sport, he didn't have like super crisp boxing. His kicks weren't even super crisp, but he was just dominating these fights and winning over and over and over again. He had something that is not something you can necessarily see, but it's there. And John Jones had a really high-level wrestling pedigree, same as Morales. Morales is going to be the champion. It's just a matter of time. Welterweight right now is the most exciting weight class, the most interesting as well. You have so many new young guys coming up, like, for example, Ian Gary. You have Joaquin Buckley. You have Morales. Jack Della Magdalena. Really interesting matchups. Morales goes out there and he dominates Gilbert Burns and he beats him worse than the current champion, Jack Della Magdalena, went to war with Gilbert Burns. Morales goes in there and finishes him. So obviously styles makes fights, but let's talk about Jack Della Magdalena versus Morales. It's a tough fight. And it's a tough fight because Morales doesn't use, super crisp technical boxing. He's a very chaotic style fighter, and he's a little unpredictable. He's also 25 years old with 18 fights. He's been very active and very consistent the entire time he's been a professional fighter. So for me, there's two guys who are dark horses at that welterweight division. Joaquin Buckley is a guy who I can see beating Jack Della Magdalena. I can see Joaquin Buckley beating Ian Gary. And Morales. Morales to me would be Morales versus Buckley would be a crazy matchup, a very interesting matchup that could be like fight of the year type candidate, But I believe that Morales would come out on top. I think Morales really is this current generation's. I think he is potentially like the John Jones of this generation. And I know that's a crazy statement. It's a wild statement, but he is. He's 18-0 at 25 years old. And no one has really, he hasn't been in no wars. He's been out here destroying fighters. He has a very strong grappling base. He's coming from Ecuador. He has the backstory. He has the things. He wants to be the first champion from Ecuador. He was a poor kid from Ecuador. He's about to change his life and make a bunch of money. So he has all those like intangible things. He's in a tough weight class, welterweight, and he's been out there dominating fighters, veteran fighters at that. People have been sleeping on Morales. People have been sleeping on him. And we just go alone with Gilbert Burns has been a top contender for the longest. And don't say it's because of his age, because it's not. Because Jack Della Magdalena, his fight to become a #1 contender was Gilbert Burns. And Gilbert Burns gave Jack that work for 2 rounds, you know? And Morales goes in there and dominates the fight. So Morales, to me, I'm going to call it right now and say he potentially we could be seeing potentially in the making one of the best welterweights of all time. And when the best when someone is a really good fighter, like say something like that, when Kamaru Usman was on the come up, no one thought that he would be able to beat GSP's record. You know what I'm saying? No one thought that, but he did, and he was the best welterweight we've seen, the best welterweight champ we've seen up to this point. Morales has everything. He's 25 years old. He has the grappling background. His striking is unpredictable. When you train to fight Morales, his striking isn't going to be like a regular Muay Thai fighter or a regular kickboxer, because he's not that. And he's very athletic. And 25 years old, man, he has a lot in his corner. You know what I'm saying? He has a lot to go. So I think he's for sure going to be a champion. I think he's going to for sure be a champion probably within the next year. If anybody gets injured on any fight, you know, he could easily come in short notice replacement fighter and win and get the belt. Morales beats Jack Della Magdalena. He beats Ian Gary. He beats Ian Gary because of the wrestling. Ian Gary has great striking. He's a tall fighter. Morales is also a tall fighter. But the main thing is the wrestling and the unorthodox striking. You know, Jack Della Magdalena beats Ian Gary. Morales beats them both. Buckley beats Jack Della Magdalena, and Buckley beats Ian Gary. Shavkat is an interesting matchup. If Shavkat and Morales were to match, I think Morales would win just because he has the X factor. Shavkat is a hell of a fighter, but I'm going to go with Morales just because of he's a younger guy. He has something that you can't really see. You know, he just goes in there and wins. He has something you can't see. So for me, out of all the fighters in the 170 weight class right now, I'm going to say Morales is the guy who's going to hold the belt for a long time and potentially beat Kamaru Usman's record. You know, in 5 years from now, Morales would be 30 years old, 31 years old. And that would be starting to reach his prime. So he definitely is a fighter that is here to stay and is going to be it's going to be real interesting to see him continuing his come up. He has a solid team of guys around him he has a very close-knit team, and he obviously wants to be the first champion from Ecuador. So Morales, I'm pretty much picking him to win damn near every fight he comes up in next. You know, we look at that whole top 10, he's a very tough matchup for everybody. And I think a lot of people have been sleeping on him for a long time. Next up, we have Buckley and Kamaru Usman fighting. Buckley is going to beat Usman. You know, I hate to say it because Usman's my guy, but a theme that we're seeing in the recent fights is Gilbert Burns. Like Gilbert Burns, he only really had a couple reasons to still be fighting, right? And those reasons are he never became the champion, so he still wants to become a champion, right? Another reason is he could just be making a lot of money and be fighting because he's getting paid really well. Morales, on the other hand, he's fighting because he's not making nowhere near as much as Gilbert Burns is making, and he also wants to become a champion. You know, he's a broke kid from Ecuador. So Morales, he just had more energy going into the fight. Buckley is in the same boat. Buckley's a dude from St. Louis, Missouri, who wants to take care of his grandma and stuff like that. So, and he wants to be a champion. You know, Tyron Woodley, mind you, Tyron Woodley was a dominant champion from St. Louis. So Buckley's trying to keep it going. You know, I want Buckley to win. To be honest, I want the best man to win. I like both guys, but I do think this matchup is Kamaru's looked great. He doesn't look like he's missed a step. I think that Buckley just has an X factor, the same way Morales has an X factor. Out of everybody in the top 10, you can see Gary doesn't really have the X factor. And it's really hard to put your finger on what the X factor even is. But when we look at someone like Buckley, when he came into the UFC and he had his first fight against Impa, and he hit him with a 360 spin kick, crazy highlight reel knockout, even though he doesn't have a Taekwondo background, even though he's not like some crazy good striker, you know, he's not like an MVP. You would think you would see something like that from MVP, you know, but he manages to pull it off. So in the actual fight, when you're talking about martial arts, there's skills, and then there's also just understanding when you can throw moves and when you can attack and when you can fight and having some sort of like animal instinct. You know what I'm saying? And that's what the X factor is, I believe. So when we see John Jones on his come up, when he's beating all these guys, he just has an understanding of fighting a little bit more than the other guys, even if they're better than him technically. I'm talking John Jones in the early days. That's what we see with Morales, and that's what we see with Buckley. That's what I see with Buckley. So I believe Buckley it will be a tough fight. Like, Kamaru is going to come in there with a lot of shit for him. But in these little situations where you're going from the ground to the feet to the cage, I believe that's where Buckley wins the fight, because he will do random shit that you're just not expecting, because he's just thinking about fighting and trying to take you out the entire time. I believe that's where the fight is won for Buckley. And I think that's what's going to happen in this fight with Buckley and Kamaru. I think it will probably end up being a second round finish for Buckley if he wins. I don't see Buckley winning a decision. I see it being just like a crazy battle and him maybe slipping a big punch in there or slipping a big kick in there. And people been sleeping on Buckley. You know, Buckley beat the one dude. I'm not even going to try to attempt to pronounce his name, but he fought on this card. He knocked him out in St. Louis. And that guy's a really good fighter. Buckley knocked him out. You know, Buckley beats really good fighters. And when you watch him fight, it might not seem like he's like super, super skilled or super crisp, but he has the X factor the same way as Morales has the X factor. If Buckley beats Kamaru, they could potentially make Buckley versus Morales. If that fight happens, I'm going with Morales. But I don't want to see that. I want to see Buckley, if he wins, get an individual title shot. And I want to see Buckley fight Gary. Whoever wins that fights for the title. I want to see Morales fight. Maybe Morales, you could just give him the title shot. You know, give him a title shot. You know, maybe have him sit out and wait for the title shot. Or I don't think you should risk. You could have him fight someone like Kobe, but to be honest, Kobe doesn't really deserve the fight with Morales right now is a top contender. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think Buckley's going to win. I hate to say it because, you know, Usman's my guy, but I do think Buckley's going to win that fight. I think Usman is the better fighter, like skill for skill, but I think Buckley just has more of the intangibles right now, and he has just more to gain from the situation. The same way Morales had more to gain from from Burns. And I think Buckley is hungry the same way Morales is hungry. And I think Buckley's going to win that fight. I hate to say it. Morales, was an easy pick for me personally. And I think those two guys are the most dangerous guys in the division right now. More than Shavkat, more than Gary. And the difference is when Gary fought MVP, the way Gary fought MVP is the reason why I don't believe he would beat someone like Morales or Buckley. If Buckley or Morales were to fight MVP, they wouldn't have no crazy strategic game plan at that. It's cool, you can have that game plan, but it is a sport, but what gives these guys the X factor is just the way they approach the fight. And when it comes to fighting, you could throw all the technique out the window. You could throw all your belts out the window. At the end of the day, it's a fight. And these guys, specifically right now, Buckley and Morales, they have something that you can't really see or measure. And Morales, I'm going to call it right now, I think he's going to be the welterweight champion, very soon within the next year. And I think he's going to hold the belt for a long time. Learn to fight.